else in the...
Yeah, we have 3 more people coming in right now.
Great. Okay.
All right.
Let's get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Village of Martins Editions Election Candidate Forum. I'm George Mackless. I'm the chair of the election committee. I want to thank all of the candidates for being here tonight. I want to thank the rest of the committee for all of their hard work in helping put this together and helping during the run-up to the election. And I want to extend a thank you to everyone in the village. We had, I think, 28 total questions come in for the forum tonight that have helped inform what you'll be hearing from the candidates tonight. So I want to say thank you to everyone. That's fantastic levels of engagement from all of you. We hope you find the forum informative. One little thing that I will give you a heads up now, and you'll also hear it from me at the end of the evening. Ballots will start going out fairly soon. You'll get an email from the village giving you the heads up when they actually hit the mail, but ballots will be starting to go out pretty soon, so keep an eye out for those in your mailbox. And if you have any questions about any of the election plan, any of the dates, anything like that, feel free to reach out to the election committee, VMA, elections@martinseditions.org, or you can check out the committee page or the election page on the village website. So again, thank you to everyone for being here tonight. We're going to start with some opening statements from the candidates, and we'll have a series of questions, and then we'll wrap everything up at the end with some concluding statements. So, kicking off, I'm going to hand it off to my fellow committee member, Paul Weller.
Thank you, Chairman George. We appreciate very much the opportunity to be a part of one of the most important functions, I think, that our village has, and that is the search for, finding, and put into office important and competent people that will help us to continue the success of this 100-plus year old village here at Martins Editions. As a person who has been a resident of Martins Editions for more than 40 years and have been through all the steps and served on the council, I can tell you that this is a very important program and project that we have in the village. I want to give you first an overview here. We're very pleased to have 5 nominees, or if you will, candidates for election. We have 3 open seats coming up on July 1, and we have 5 candidates, as I said. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, and we will call them individually for their opening statement. The committee will then begin the question portion of the evening. For each question, the candidates will have 90 seconds, a minute and a half, for their response to that question. The candidates will then have 1 minute for a closing statement at the end. So we are very appreciative of all of you being a part of this. The election will be totally by mail, which is a bit different from years past. So we are pleased that we had several dozen of you submit questions, and we are pleased that we have such a large turnout tonight for this candidate forum. With that, I'm going to call on Arthur Alexander as our first candidate and give him a question. But so George,
Arthur, you're up for opening statement.
I'll turn it back to you when I'm ready. Yes.
Okay. Thanks everyone for being here. We have a really good turnout, and I also want to thank all my other colleagues here, current council members and others who are running 5 5 candidates. It's a real turnout. So thank you to everybody involved. On my own behalf, I want to say that I think the thing that I have most going for me here is experience. I've been on the council since 2010. I've been chair, I've been treasurer for a good part of that time. I've been associated with several of the committees, chairing the tree committee about 5-6 years ago. Been liaison to the walkability and to the safety task force. And we are now seeing some of their recommendations coming into force or being considered. But one of the things I really want to emphasize is just because I've had this institutional experience, and I think I know how things are run around here, doesn't mean that we necessarily have to continue to do things the way we've done it. It's important to consider change as well. We don't want to be stuck in the past, even though I'm kind of a representative of the past. I do want to think of the future as well. We have to be open to change. And I think as members of the various committees I mentioned, we introduced a new concept of subsidizing the planting of private trees. The Walkability Committee is pushing some of the recommendations that they pushed. We are now implementing in putting in speed bumps and other traffic control measures. Some things I learned while on the Safety Task Force, I've proposed in the latest budget to support older people in need in the community. So it is these sorts of things, the analysis, the experience, and the willingness to change. For those reasons, I am looking for your vote.
George, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah. So, thank you, Arthur. Next up, Marty.
Oh, thank you. Anyway, thank you all on many levels. I want to thank Niles and Andrew particularly for getting the very first speed bump in on Thornapple Street after years of we've waited so long, and it got installed on Monday morning. So that's a great start. I'm running for the council because we have some serious safety issues to take care of. Traffic safety and infrastructure, two at the top. Crime is an issue as well. My goal is very simple, to get the traffic and infrastructure safety work done. People have been waiting so long for it. And to make community participation easier so that people have more of a voice in the community and feel more connected. The most basic responsibility of government is public safety. And it takes about 2 hours for a contractor to install a speed monitor or a speed hump. It shouldn't take years to do it. I'm an economist. My efficiency is one of the gifts I think I can bring to the village. The problems that we've had in getting to this, that it has taken so long to implement the traffic safety in particular, are concerning to me. That indicates to me that we need really database, back-driven, efficient management. I'm looking forward to working with Andrew and Niles and everybody, all the entire community, to get in real gear here, because we really need to get these crosswalks painted. We need to get the electronic speed monitors in. Thank you for the speed bumps. The traffic engineers report just came in this week, yesterday, and I've asked both Andrew and Niles to put that up on the website so everybody in the community can see it. It's got some good info in it. What I don't think we need is top-heavy bureaucracy in a small village like this. We need a council that will get things done. The traffic, paint the crosswalks, ticket the drivers who run the stop signs. Infrastructure, get the fire hydrants tested, make sure they work. Check the leaks of the aging gas lines. In terms of crime, we need community alerts about vandalism, break-ins, car thefts, and we really need to look again at what practical security measures we could actually realistically implement. We also need to make sure that the village will have good standard practices. Right now, it's hard to have a framework to even talk to each other. A lot of people aren't even on the listserv. So I think we need to really institute good basic practices for community government. Hold open
Marty.
Zoom forums,
Thank you, Marty.
interview recommendations, message board.
Marty.
I want to thank you, and I look forward to working with you. Thanks again.
Thank you. Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Fattig, and I live on Melville Place. My husband John and I have lived here for 35 years and raised our twins in this wonderful community. For my day job, I practiced law for many years and currently serve as a board member for a nonprofit focused on sustainability. Closer to home, I've served on the VMA Council since 2015. In that time, I've been involved in a number of initiatives, including our expanded ethics ordinance, as well as municipal service additions, and infrastructure improvement projects. I was directly involved in the initiation of the leaf vacuuming program and championed the composting program pool. Of note, while I had hoped the village would fund the composting program, we learned from survey responses that most residents supported the creation of a VMA group discount pool for composting, but didn't want the village to pay for it, and therefore we didn't. I also participated in the installation of new energy efficient streetlights that paid for themselves in less than half the time projected and drastically lowered the village's monthly electric costs. I personally championed the recent installation of a new permanent speed hump on Thornheppel Street, which was a walkability task force recommendation. And that brings me to what I hope to continue to pursue as a council member, implementing the walkability task force recommendations, such as traffic calming measures. The issue is near and dear to my heart, as well as the hearts of many residents, as they have indicated in the council's annual survey and in more detail during the walkability survey. If reelected, I look forward to being personally involved and ensuring that those changes are implemented in full. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben?
Hi, yes. George, Paul, the rest of the election committee, I'd like to thank you for putting this together. Why am I running for council? It's quite simple. It's because, in my opinion, this neighborhood has become very contentious. And looking at it, I realize that we have the largest code of ordinance compared to our sister neighborhoods, and we also have the highest legal bills. To me, that seems to correlate. So that is why I'm running. I think the council, with good intentions, has tried to do too much, and that has caused contentiousness and division in the neighborhood. So I'm running to kind of simplify things. I look forward to your questions. I hope you vote for me, or I hope you just vote. Thank you. Yes, underneath time.
Thank you, Ben. Jeff?
Okay, good.
Hi, all. What a privilege and honor to be here this evening. I want to thank all the fellow candidates, my fellow council members, members of the election committee, residents, friends, and especially my family who make it all go. VMA is a very special place for my family for almost a decade now. Like many of you, we choose this little hamlet near the nation's capital because of its small town vibe, neighborhood feel, and values which many of us share. Kindness, caring, engagement, where some of us literally race to see who can take out the other's recycling by Tuesday morning. Or perhaps a gift basket of chocolate, homemade pickles, or flowers that are left on our door simply just because. My re-election campaign is about the future and moving forward. After the better part of 2 years with a terrible pandemic and tensions rising in our own community over things which, frankly, perhaps any other given year would have been nothing burgers. Turn the corner, how can we lower the temperature? Increase positive engagement, hosting beloved events, focus on current day and future priorities. Less than a year ago, we saw a significant changing election with 2 new folks joining the council who brought in a change in leadership, fresh perspective with a focus on transparency, humility, and optimism. All things which I greatly and deeply care about and support. So with that said, I want to thank you all again for joining us this evening. I'm really looking forward to an engaged discussion and listening and learning from fellow panelists and hearing many questions from our residents. Back over to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So, that concludes the opening statements. I'm going to hand it over to one of my fellow committee members, Eric Shaw, who's going to take care of the first question for us as soon as we get a thumbs up from Niles that the timer has been reset over to 90 seconds.
Thanks, George. I'll be presenting the questions. You may notice that we're going to be calling on candidates in random order.
having used a random number generator to determine the response time, I'm going to be calling on Marty, Stan, Jeff, Susan, and author in that order to address the first question as soon as the clock pops up.
Oh, it's see.
Very good.
Great. So the majority of voter questions submitted concerned village services and infrastructure, including the idea of using the cash reserves of the village to support potential changes. Regarding potential service changes, we received the most questions relating to sidewalk snow removal, including specifically having it for residents over 65 who request it. Other services mentioned included weekly food waste composting service and restoring in-person versus mail election.
Eric, could you turn towards the screen when you speak? You're dropping out when you turn to the side.
I apologize.
That's much better.
Great. I'll repeat the question.
Okay.
What service projects, if any, would you prioritize while serving in the council? And we'll start with Marty.
Delighted. Great question. I would start with public safety as a core service that we need. And I would also, when it comes to snow shoveling, I think there's a really smart way to handle that, a good way to handle it that's efficient. We have wonderful neighbors here. I want to thank the scouts, the scout troop, and all the good neighbors who shovel snow. But I think we have a problem with public sidewalks having ice on them. For example, on Taylor Street, you'll have most of it shoveled, and then you'll hit an icy patch. And people don't shovel the show. They don't fail to clear the sidewalk because they don't want to. They're with health issues or they're out of town. I think it makes sense to have the snow plowing crew that does our streets and already shovels and clears Brookville Road sidewalks do a sweep through the village afterwards and just pick up those patches to make sure that our public sidewalks are really clear. Because I agree, an icy sidewalk can cause a life-threatening injury. But really, I think that the speed humps, the speed monitors, paint the crosswalks in terms of public services. I really think that we are in a wonderful position in terms of our finances. I appreciate that. I'm very cautious financially myself. I'm an economist. But I really think that we can put safety as our first service because that is the fundamental purpose of government. And I think the second service is to make it more easy for people to speak. Have the Zoom forums, community recommendations in the council packets. That should be public. Provide a message board. And a lot of people aren't even on a listserv. I think it makes sense to hire a contractor part-time to run a listserv and a message board. So there's a lot we can do. And one of the services is a useful, to just have efficient, resident-friendly formats at the meetings. So
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Ben, you're next up.
I am a big fan of the services here in March Editions that we have already. We get our trash picked up twice a week. The garbage people come in and they pick up our trash. I would not add any more additional services. I don't see any issues with the shoveling of snow. I live on Taylor Street. Of course, there are occasional icy spots, but that will happen whether or not you hire somebody or you shovel it yourself. There's icy spots on Brookville Road. It's just science and shade that causes the ice. But yeah, I think we're good. And by the way, my last name's Dunford. I saw in the chat that you knew what it was. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll next hear from Jeff.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the question. And you know, I hearken back a bit to when the village was first incorporated, and it really laid out carefully what are the types of services that we should be responsible for. And Ben sort of just alluded to those, but fairly straightforward, right? Maintenance, taking care of sidewalks, street repair, street safety, lighting, a lot of things that we've heard about. Non-controversial. So, the things that we've heard from the community and their voice very loud and clear in survey and through data is looking at things like improved walkability, which was mentioned already by Councilperson Fadig of unanimously was passed to make improvements. Also for traffic safety, the one new service which I think has come up, which doesn't necessarily fit within this bill, is around the aging in place. But if we look at the census data from 2020, I know Arthur has pointed this out prior, is that for all adults, we have about 25% of adults who are considered seniors. So I think the idea of perhaps exploring at least some ideas, whether it's better information, I know Arthur has mentioned some pilot programs, but I would be up for exploring some new ideas, even if it's simply connecting with better services at the county level. Thank you.
Thanks. Susan, you're up.
Okay, so as you may have guessed, I would prioritize walkability implementation. I think that we do have fantastic services generally, and would be hopeful that this year we might be able to have a more environmentally conscious waste management firm, if that should materialize during the bidding process. I think that would be a huge help, and actually probably cost efficient, definitely cost efficient, probably a savings measure as well. I would agree with Jeff that we do need to look very, very closely at our survey results. When we have the annual surveys, residents tell us what they really want us to prioritize, and we are elected representatives, and we are expected to make tough decisions at times, but we should be guided by what the residents want. And that's how I have tried to approach my role as a council member, evaluating things thoughtfully and in a measured way before committing to a position, finding out whether it's feasible. So I would continue to do that. Done.
Great. Arthur?
Okay, yes. Well, in terms of new initiatives, in the current budget that is up for review at this moment, we did put in snow shoveling on the public right-of-way for individuals who request it. Now, it is expensive. The last time this was done, back in 2009 or 10, shoveling the sidewalks cost twice as much as shoveling the roads. So if we do it on a request basis, it will be less, but I'm suggesting it, and I hope it's approved. The other totally new initiative, something we've not done at all, I've proposed, and since we have so many people here, I'd like to get your feedback, and the council would, and that is supporting older people in need who need help with services, and particularly through Chevy Chase at Home. There is an item in the budget to do that. We are considering it, and we desperately need your feedback. Now, one thing I will disagree with Marty on the need for greater policing. When we first, a resident asked whether it met a cost-benefit analysis, I said it doesn't. This is one of the safest areas in the entire country. What we are buying with police is comfort. I'm not against that, but I don't think by putting more police on the road are we going to get an even safer community than we have.
Thank you, Arthur. So I have the next question, which touches on a subject that obviously immediately piques my interest, which is regarding the infrastructure projects that were discussed in a number of the questions. Residents raised concerns, interest level in a number of projects relating to, and there's a fairly long list, so I hope you'll stick with me, fire hydrant inspection and repair, gas line inspections, installation of stop signs and painted crosswalks at the intersection of Brookville and Bradley, implementing recommendations of the walkability survey, replacing, widening, or constructing VMA sidewalks, and remedying water runoff and pooling issues on Brookville, particularly at Oxford. Can you describe what infrastructure projects you would prioritize while serving on the council? Susan, you're up first.
Okay, so I would definitely prioritize those that are in our bailiwick, because I think we should really stick to what we're charged with doing. Definitely installation of crosswalks, and I think we should look at VMA sidewalks, whether we need to install new ones, where on those streets that don't have even one sidewalk. Pooling is definitely something to consider, is something that has been considered, and we will need additional resources. We'll need a consultant to work on that. As far as Brookville and Bradley, that's an ongoing saga, but definitely is under Niles and others, is on their radar to improve. But it requires state cooperation since it's state highway. But those are the big ones.
Thank you, Susan. Arthur, you're up next.
Okay, thank you. The water issues in the streets is something that we're currently working on with the money, but we have to do that in cooperation with other jurisdictions, many of these street corners, but other municipalities, and with the WSSC, who actually does the storm sewers. So we are currently doing that. The streets we are already looking at, and we are continuing to look at the crosswalks, the signing, the posting. The report that was mentioned by Marty that our traffic engineers just came up with give us a really good blueprint for things that we could do. But as Susan mentioned, some of the other issues have to deal with the state. Putting signs up on Brookville or crosswalks is across a state highway. We don't have the unilateral authority to do some of those things. But I think the things that are going to cost money are storm sewers, which we normally do not do. They're not our function, but working with the other municipalities and with the sewer people, we will be able to get to that. And the projects are in hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Ben?
Well, fire hydrants and water runoff and gas lines are all the responsibility of of the utility company. I would not be in favor of using our station dollars for somebody else's work. My biggest concern would be implementing safer streets. I got the traffic report yesterday. I read it. The one thing that stood out is 9 out of 10 pedestrians when struck by a vehicle traveling 20 miles per hour survive. That number drops to 5 out of 10 vehicles traveling 30 miles per hour and 1 out of 10 vehicles traveling 40 miles per hour. The traffic study showed multiple vehicles traveling 40 miles per hour. As somebody with small children, knowing that this neighborhood has a lot of small children, that would be what I would work towards fixing, because that is more sedition responsibility. I would look at implementing some, not all, because I don't agree with all the recommendations of the traffic engineer, but I would definitely look at installing speed devices, speed bumps, I think called for cutouts, provided working with the streets to ensure that they will support it. That's what I would do. Next.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Jeff?
Great. Thank you so much. What a wonderful question. And let me start by saying this. First of all, those litany of issues are covered by our charter. So, and these are priorities that our residents have offered. So there's a couple things to think about. First of all, we know we have about $2.5 million in reserves. And this does not include the almost $1 million that we've gotten back as part of the COVID money. So we've got a lot of money in our reserves. And the other thing about this is, if you recall, the annual survey is given around the fall, but yet our budgeting process happens now and through May. What I would love to see is a public forum coming up in the next month where we could actually go through this list of priorities and get some more informed information about what the community feels is their priority list. And again, with practically about $3.5 million that's sitting there, is it possible to do all? Do we have to prioritize and leave some out? Again, I'm a safety person. So when we talk about streets, we talk about gas lines, we talk about flooding. We know someone unfortunately was electrocuted in history here. I would focus on safety, but I think the residents speak, and then also we've got a lot of budget. I think we can take care of a lot of issues that have come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Marty?
Hi, thank you. Niles, can you turn on the blue sky timer? There you go.
Yep.
Thanks. Jeff's got a good point about our budget. We have ample reserves. We have a rainy day fund 3 times over. And we're getting additional money from the state next year. The governor just signed additional street funding money, infrastructure money. So this is not a case of having to pinch pennies at all. We're very fortunate that way. I think that the getting the crosswalks improved is probably the single safest thing we can do. There are also the possibility, this is in the engineer's report, of getting stop signs that are much more visible because they kind of blink. And I think the speed monitors are terrific. They really do help slow people down. So I'm willing to invest in all of that. On the fire hydrants, we had a house burned down on Taylor Street some years back because the hydrants didn't work. And the thing there is that WSSC says they inspect them, but they don't say they test them. And we've really been trying to figure out, like, when was the last time they were actually tested? I went to the fire protection agency, and looked at how you actually test fire hydrants. There are 2 ways. You test them individually, and then you have to test them in sequence in a string, to make sure the one at the end of the string still has water if you need it. So there's a real need there, I think, to take responsibility. WSSC has not stepped up to even respond to my inquiries and other people's inquiries. We need to make sure that's done because that's our community safety. So I'm looking at fire hydrants, and there's a gas leak, I think. You smell gas when you walk down Taylor. So we really need to take responsibility for safety, first and foremost. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. I'll hand it over to Paul for our next question.
Okay, our next question is one that comes up many times in small government activities, and that is that what is the desirable size and the desirable activity level of local government? And to that I refer to, should we create committees? Should we should we be more outgoing to our constituents? Do you feel that the village should be more active in other areas that we are not in active work today? So that's the question. What is the role of small government, and how can we best fit in? And for that, I'll call on Ben Dunford to start that out.
Well, I'm not sure if this is going to be surprising to everybody who's been listening to me, but
I didn't get that.
can you hear me?
Can you try again?
Oh, okay. The question
That was Siri, I
is,
believe.
That was
what's
Siri,
the role that small government, small villages like Martin's Additions, what's the size and activity level of local government, as Martin's Additions is? And that includes create more committees. Should we develop regulations, more regulations than we have? Should we broaden the scope of our work? Or should we limit this to just basic government services like waste and snow removal, sidewalks and social functions and that kind of thing? What should we be doing as a village of Martin's Additions? That's the question.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to most people that I believe we should. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Oh,
All right. I don't think this is a surprise to many people.
Can you unmute him, Niall?
He's good, Paul.
Right?
Hang on.
Am I good?
Paul,
He's good.
Paul, we can all hear him. I think you might have an audio issue. Hang on.
Sorry about this, Ben.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, Paul.
I make a motion to yield back Ben his time, if that's okay.
I'll try to keep it under.
Sorry, something's wrong. Please try again.
I don't believe that this is a surprise to too many people that I believe that we should limit this role of the Martin's Addition Council. Anybody who's listened to me speak for the last 30 minutes or so knows what my answer is. I would just like to piggyback on something that was said earlier responsibility also leads to liability. So taking control of fire hydrants, and let's just say hypothetically we're testing them and it doesn't work, then Martin's Addition could be held liable. And I don't think that's a role that we in the village want to be put in. And then the other thing is I used to be a naval officer, and when we got back from deployment and all of my divers were flush with cash, we'd just say, just because you have the money doesn't mean you should spend it. So that's something that I think also relates to us in the village. And I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Jeff Lander, you're next.
Thanks so much. And again, another fabulous question. And let me address it like this. I may sound a little bit like a repetitive record, but I think when we were first incorporated in around 85, I mean, what was laid out for reasons of incorporation in terms of the basic services still hold very much today and really cover the significant number of priorities that were mentioned. However, I would like to mention that one of the big key pieces for incorporation was around modernization and increased adaptability to change, but also maintenance of our quality of life and community character. So I think that there is some wiggle room, as Arthur has shared, around looking at some new things, but as Ben has also stated, to be fiscally responsible. Now, I think one thing to just put out there, and again, that is something for the voters and residents to decide. You know, the first year I was on the council, we spent almost 10 months working on 2 ordinances, the sign and ethics. And whether you agree or disagree in terms of the content, the need, or what have you, I think our community would like to take a step back, and that if we ever initiate something again, that's a priority, that they're informed up front, and that we spend less time on ordinances and more on community engagement and forums. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeff. Arthur Alexander, you're on next.
Okay, thank you. First, I want one kind of misperception, Ben. The money that we get to spend for our budget in Martin's Addition, we have very little to do with. It just comes in over the transom. If anyone out there remembers what a transom is. Anyone who doesn't know what a transom, I'll tell you. But it comes in. And that's one of the reasons we have so much money in the bank, is that we have not been spending on programs. Now, I did a little statistical analysis a year or 2 ago, looking at all the communities, all the municipalities in Maryland, and how much they spend and what does it depend on. Depends on 3 things. How many people do you have? How rich are you? And what's your property tax base? Well, the property tax base doesn't really affect Martin's Addition because we spend very little of our property tax. We have very little property tax, less than 7% of total income. But we are a very rich community. The average household income is over $400,000. The median per capita income, there's many people with more has less, is over $100,000. And so that, in a way, is the main reason we have so much money coming in over the transom, which I'll talk to you about later. Thank you.
Okay, next question is to Marty, or the next.
Okay, I'd like to pick up on this question, and thank you. I think that one of the things we really do need to invest in is communication systems. We have no neighborhood alert system. It's easy to sign up for these. They're not expensive. And so, for example, when the gas main broke in front of Katie Howard's house, which is just down the street from mine, people were getting evacuated, but there was no community alert system. We need communication systems. That's not expensive. The listserv, a lot of people have trouble posting on for various reasons. I think we need a village message board so we can have village discussions. Again, as Jeff said, to help people articulate and develop priorities. That's a community project, not just a council on project from on high. And so a community alert system, a listserv, and a message board. And again, you can hire somebody. It's not expensive. You can hire a firm to do that part-time, to manage your listserv and your message board. All of that would help build community, which goes back to what Jeff said, which is one of the purposes here is not just to do the bare minimum, but to actually enrich this community. I love, for example, there's the Community Engagement Committee, which brings people together on all kinds of projects. I love the fact that we have a scout troop that is really thriving. I think we need to do more for seniors. And Chevy Chase at Home can do some of that. Community Cares group here at Martin's Additions can do that. I think about the snow shoveling, for example. For the first 30 years I lived here, I shoveled people out on the north end of Chestnut. And now I'm getting to the point where people sometimes shovel me out. That's the way communities should work. And so I would encourage things like that that just help build community cooperation, welcome new residents. We're growing increasingly diverse, which I'm delighted by. 2 years ago, we had some racial, political vandalism. And I think that's something that is definitely a responsibility for the council to get on task, because that's not who we are. It's not who we want to be anyway. So there are lots of things that we can do here that really will help make life richer, better, and more connected. I'm for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. And Susan Fag, you're next.
Okay, well, I actually am sort of down the middle on where I stand as far as the appropriate durable size and activity level. I think that we do have an obligation to provide those services that everyone has mentioned. I agree with Ben that there is liability where we take on issues that are not traditionally or even legally within our domain. And I think that the community engagement activities are definitely things that can be and should be encouraged on group bases, but not necessarily as part of our village government. I think residents don't want to pay for more committees and more subcommittees and all of the necessary state law environment, all of the necessary requirements that flow from state law for open meetings. If we make, for example, a gardening club a function of the community engagement committee, then it requires people to formalize in a way that really doesn't serve anyone, and it doesn't make our community friendlier. We, I think, are basically at about the right size.
I think Eric's next.
Yes, sir. Question 3 has to do with processes in the village. Some residents have explicitly said that they're turned off by the length of village meetings and extended resident comments compared to official council or committee actions. A related process question addressed how you would engage with those with opposing viewpoints. How would you bounce and address these concerns? And we're going to start with Jeff.
Eric, thank you so much. And again, I want to thank the community for posing that question. It's a really fabulous question. And I think this was actually something that was germane in the last election. And you saw with the new council members who joined a much more inclusive environment with more humility that has provided an avenue for all voices. And I appreciate the idea, there are times we've gone over time, but it's also been an opportunity to really hear and not cut people off. And I think that has been very important. But another area that I think we have a lot of room to work on is how do we engage our volunteers? We've had 3 volunteers on our committees resign in the last 2 years. We've had committee members who have said openly, and they still, in my heart, saying things like, I didn't sign up for this. And so I think that we need to find a way that we can engage each other in a more cordial way, even if we continue to perhaps have our disagreements, to find ways to treat each other with kindness, with caring, and respecting different opinions, even if we have to go a little bit over. And you know what? Folks can drop off if they need to, but I think hearing all voices is the most critical piece. Thank you.
Susan, we'll hear from you next.
I think give her 1 second. She had to switch computers, I think. I think she had to switch computers. Hang on.
Yeah, shall we bounce to the next person and come back to Susan?
I think I'm back.
Great.
Well, wait, let me see. Remind me of the question now. I just had a cataclysmic event here.
Sure, Susan.
these are process questions about village communications. How would you engage with those with opposing viewpoints, and how would you balance and address concerns such as the length of village meetings, extended residents' comments, etc.?
Okay, so I do. Let me see if I can adjust this. I do understand, because I have heard those comments as well, that meetings do go on entirely too long, and it's hard for some residents to stay on that long if they have a particular question they want to address, or they want to hear how the council addresses. They often have to drop off. I think, we all, I think, are reasonably good, decent people, and we all have the best interest of our community at heart. I think during the pandemic, things got a little heated at times, but I think that we've seen just in the last, sorry, I don't have the counter.
Oh,
30
you have 30
seconds.
seconds left,
Okay.
just about 30
So we
seconds.
have seen an improvement as we've all returned to in person. I think having all council members in one place instead of wherever they are is actually very beneficial.
Thank you, Susan. We'll hear next from Marty.
Thank you. And Niles again, there's the timer. Thank you. I think this is really a structural issue. This is where efficiency and management comes in. One of the reasons that the council meetings end up being a discussion of things is because we haven't had a forum beforehand where we can really have people get a chance to talk. So the only chance you have to talk, the only avenue is the council meeting. Well, then of course you're going to have people on different sides. It can get contentious, and of course people have a lot to say. We have a lot of people with real expertise in this village, and they deserve to be heard with respect. I want to hear them personally. So I think, well, again, it goes back to the structures, having good basic practices, standard practices. If you've got issues coming up at a council meeting, hold a public forum beforehand so people really do feel heard and have a chance to actually share information. Again, it's not just people being, heard, but actually we do better decisions when we hear them. And having a VMA message board would help with discussions. It would take the load off of a council meeting. Providing community commit recommendations at the council's public meeting packets. That gives everybody the same information. We can all go to the same place instead of backtracking. Efficient resident-friendly formats are essential. If you cut off people during the meeting from speaking, well, that just creates resentment. It creates polarization. It creates friction. And it's much better to have a forum ahead of time, have a message board, and really be efficient about our practices. That's not hard to do, and it doesn't cost a dime. Thank you.
Arthur, you're up next.
Yeah, I think I agree and don't agree with Marty here. In terms of running an efficient meeting so that everybody has a chance to hear what people have to say, I am in favor of cutting people off at a certain length of time, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I've heard many discussants get up at a meeting, so I'm only going to spend a minute, I put a stopwatch on, and 8 or 9 minutes later, they're still going. So I think 2 or 3 minute limits are not unwarranted here. On the other hand, I totally agree. We need, and with Jeff, who's a major, to have more organized community discussions. Just where get together over a particular subject. People have all the time to discuss it. We don't have to cut them off. So I do want to cut people off at council meetings at a reasonable amount of time. I don't think we should have to go to 11 o'clock, beginning at 7:30 to go through the agenda that we have. On the other hand, having other methods, other means, whether it's message boards, a community email list, and the community forums, all of which we can air things to our heart's content, but not on village council time, but on the community's time. Thank you.
Ben?
To make sure I have the question right, is how will they relate to people with opposing viewpoints?
That was definitely part of it.
All right. Well, I think to echo what our committee chairperson Andrew has said before, is we're elected as individuals and not as parties. Keep that in mind. And to say what Susan said earlier, we're all people on the committee have the best interest of the community at heart. As long as you realize that, you can treat people with respect and dignity. That's the key thing. We are 5 separate individuals, 5 separate life stories, which allows us to look at 5 separate sets of facts and come to 5 separate conclusions. Doesn't mean that we're right, doesn't mean that we're wrong. We get to foster a sense of community by listening, understanding where people are coming from, and I would also add transparency so that the people in the village understand how we came to that conclusion. So I think that answers the question of related opposing viewpoints. Thank you.
Sure. George?
Okay. Thank you. So our next question was reflected in a few inputs from some of the residents. Do you support making the Public Safety Task Force a permanent public safety committee to deal with residents' public safety concerns and priorities? Why or why not? We're first going to go to Marty.
Thanks. Yes, I do. I think that, again, it's partly a structural issue to give residents a forum in which we can really address these issues. Like I said, we have a lot of people with expertise in this town. We're very fortunate. And they need a framework in which we can actually address these issues. I mean, we've had a lot of car thefts, for example. I don't know the best way to stop a car theft, but somebody here might. And I'd like to hear from them. I'd like to hear that discussion. So you set up a structure where people can, in fact, bring safety issues, which are the predominant issues through the villages: traffic safety, infrastructure safety, crime, and snow shoveling. Those are the safety issues. And we need a regular framework where people can address that and come up with good ideas to bring to the council. I want to point out that under the community engagement plan, there's nothing there where it has to be regulated by the village. This is about just facilitating cooperation on various issues. The garden club does not have to be an official village committee, but a safety committee should be. And I think that the one of the issues that spills over and makes the council meetings run too long is that there is not this framework for to have that discussion elsewhere. And so I support that because safety is an issue, all kinds of safety: traffic safety, infrastructure safety, crime, and winter safety with the snow shoveling. So that is something that needs a framework where people can discuss it outside the council meetings and bring recommendations to the council. So I support that.
Thank you, Marty. Jeff?
Thanks for the question. And full disclosure, I am with Arthur, one of the co-liaisons, so I'm just putting that out there. With that said, safety is part of the original mission and set of services that are part of the incorporation. So the idea of emergency preparedness, street safety, these are core fundamental areas of services and activities that are listed. Now, if you look at other jurisdictions near us in Chevy Chase, there are some public safety committees. Sometimes they meet more frequently, as you would imagine during a pandemic. Other times they may meet once a year. But I think because it's in our core charter, because it's an ongoing priority, but most importantly, this is shaped by the community. So it could be a question, again, that is posed in our annual survey. Right now, there's additional research to follow up on aging in place. And perhaps there may be some new things that, as a task force, they can take on. And we could take up the issue of making it a permanent committee, perhaps in the next fiscal year. But I do support it, again, based upon what's in the charter and also based upon the priorities that residents have demonstrated. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Ben?
Should we have a public safety task force committee? I do not believe that we need to form a committee. I believe safety is paramount. I'm not anti-safety, but I cannot see how a committee would stop car thefts. They're very few, by the way. They're not exactly a big issue. I think the crime rate in our area is probably one of the lowest in the DC metropolitan area. I don't think a committee would be that valuable to enhancing safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Arthur?
Yeah, as Jeff mentioned, I'm one of the liaison to the safety committee and been working with them. And I am not in favor of continuing it as a permanent committee for a couple of reasons, although I could be possibly convinced otherwise. The reasons have to do with, we did the survey of the community and what their issues were. It was not hot button issues as a couple of people thought it was on a few selected issues. There were some people who were very passionate about one subject, but when you surveyed the community as a whole was not. And as the task force got into doing its work, it found out that the most important issue, the most common issue that people wanted to talk about was the walkability. And the walkability committee had already dealt with many of those issues. And so they were hunting around for kind of other things to address, and the aging in place was the kind of down third, fourth on the list. So I am not in favor of continuing this kind of a committee. I agree with Jeff that it's a core part of our responsibilities as a village. And in this case, what we really have to figure out is how to work better with the gas company. If you figure out how to work with the gas company, I'll elect you mayor of this place. Otherwise, I think it is a matter for the council and the manager and working with our local utilities to work this out.
Thank you, Arthur. Susan?
Okay, so am I
Mhm.
muted? So I would agree with both Arthur and Ben that the task force really should not be formalized into a permanent committee. I think they've done, a creditable job during their tenure. Their two tenures, their extended tenure, but I think that, as Arthur said, the issues that they were charged with looking into really didn't materialize as expected. And I think that that because, as Arthur and Ben said, safety is paramount and it shouldn't require another committee, I wouldn't formalize it.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay. Our next question has to do with ethics. And as you know, the Village of Martin's Editions adopted an ethics ordinance. And so the question is about this, and that is, were you supportive of the modifications that were made in ethics at the time for the Village of Martin's Editions? And in the year since it was adopted, has your opinion changed? Would you propose any changes to address concerns about village residents being in position to judge the ethical behavior of neighbors with whom they may have pre-existing relationships? A very difficult question, and I'll open that up with Jeff Blander.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate this question. Well, my record, I think, is pretty clear, and I was always the 1 and 4 last year going through this process. And it's an interesting juxtaposition to the safety question, because, again, safety is one of the key areas within the charter. Ethics is not explicitly stated. So, again, I just put that out there. The other piece, though, really, I think, is also around why it was, I feel, still not necessarily needed. First of all, we know when it comes to volunteers, they serve at the discretion of the council, so they could be let go at any point if there is an issue. As far as council members, they could be recalled. There are things on the books if there's any criminal behavior, and of course you could be voted out. And then if it's village staff, I think also through HR policy. So there was redundancy, and this was actually brought up. Now, this does not in any way, shape, or form impact, I thought, the amazing work that is continued by Lori Mitchell, as I've stated, with the Venn diagrams and all their work. But truly, I believe that it is something that is redundant. It wasn't necessary. And also, quite frankly, the community didn't ask for it. And I think if you did a survey, I bet that they would vote to retract it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Susan, let's hear what your feeling is on this.
Okay, well, I think most people watching probably know that I supported the ethics ordinance. Many may know why I supported it. We actually perceived a very real need for some remedy that would guide a council's actions should they determine that a committee member or a council member had behaved without impartiality. I think that by instituting this action, this expanded law, we have served to reassure residents that our public officials and your public officials are not acting only in their own best interest, but in the interest of the community at large. And my appreciation has only increased in the time that the ordinance has been in place. The training that the ethics committee has undertaken this year has helped to, I think, inform the election committee so far, and is really valuable. I think it stands us in good stead and puts us in the same, puts us on a par with the state of Maryland and most governmental bodies, and we are a governmental body after all.
Thank you, Susan. Arthur Alexander.
Yeah, I did not support the ethics committee, the new legislation when it was first introduced for the reasons that Jeff mentioned. We seem to have ways of dealing with these kinds of issues already in place. On the other hand, if we were going to have this kind of new ordinance, the committee did a terrific job working with our lawyers to actually put together a very good piece of legislation. So if we were going, I thought it was too much, it was too big, it was a superstructure was going to sink the ship. But I can't even remember whether in the end I voted for it or against it. I wasn't for the basic principle of it, but it was, if we were going to do it, that was the way to do it. One of the concerns that was raised at the time is that nobody would want to serve on a committee or run for council. We have shown that not to be the case. We've had more candidates for committees and councils since then than before. It hasn't scared people away. But I still continue to think that it's a rather big superstructure for a rather small craft. One thing I did like about it, it changed the ordinance, the existing ordinance, so that if I was convicted of something, I wouldn't have to spend a year in jail, which was in the original ordinances. So that has been taken out. So I'm looking at a much more comfortable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Marty?
I agree that taking out the year in jail was a good change. I'm for that. But, I really feel like it wasn't community-based at all. That our priorities, what we heard in the neighborhood from everybody was, get the sidewalks painted, get the ticketing at the stop signs, get the safety stuff done. It was not about bias. I mean, and I've talked to a lot of people, who've been active in the village for years and years. There's no evidence has actually been a problem here. There was no cases cited at the time. It's not fact-based. It's also way too sweeping, I think. The ordinance, almost anything could be biased. And one of the changes I would think about, and I would hope that the council would think about, is maybe taking it back to financial bias, where somebody has a financial gain for something. I mean, I can't think of a single instance where a decision in Martin's edition was affected by a biased volunteer. I don't know of any, and neither did anybody else that I talked to. But we have had cases where we might want to just have good financial controls in place, and the ordinance that controls financial conflict of interest is important. One of the things that happened in the background when they were doing the changes in the ethics ordinance is that the financial safeguards actually got weakened a little bit, and I'm concerned about that. So I would look to maybe correct that omission. And at the bottom line, I'm not comfortable with having neighbors investigate neighbors. I think that the remedy here is have a standard code of conduct and the usual complaint procedure and a volunteer manual. This is not something we needed to invent the wheel on. And we do need a volunteer manual with this ethics ordinance.
Thank
I
you,
think it's
Marty.
overkill. Thanks.
Nice job, Marty. Let's hear from Ben.
Okay, was I for the ethics ordinance when it originally came out? No, I was not. I thought it was very contentious. I thought it was divisive to the community. I have since became a member of the ethics committee, and I realize that's kind of limited. It really, I disagree with Marty. I think it is very strong. It's actually pretty much only based on if somebody profits off their position at the government with March edition. So, bad news, Arthur, if you violate the ethics law, even though March edition can't get you, you probably have already violated multiple federal and state laws by profiting off your public position, so you could spend more than a year in jail. Do I think we should expand it? Absolutely and utterly not. The last thing this village needs is for people spying on each other. I mean, moving the ethics committee into some sort of Saudi virtue police is maddening to me. Yeah, so summarize. Against it, apathetic towards it, definitely don't want to expand it.
Okay. Well, thank you. I guess we go back to Eric.
Yes, sir. Question 6 concerns the advisability of new ordinances, regulations, or village projects related to safety. What, if any, of these should be addressed during your term? We had specific residents' questions about banning herbicides that could be dangerous to animals or humans, and also whether the 2019 ordinance on cell and antenna permits should be revisited and updated. Arthur, we'll start with you, please.
Can I just butt in a minute? We've launched our timer, Niles. Can you put our timer back on?
I'm working on it now, so hang on. I'm getting it right now, so just give me 1 second, okay?
That was a little quick. I apologize.
Sorry, Eric.
No, just
I'd
give
say
me.
we need better tech services.
What happened? Where it disappeared?
It
Let's add that to the to-do list.
yeah, no,
We'll have
it's
better tech
it's
services.
fine.
Because Niall shouldn't have to struggle with this.
No,
That's something
it's-
we can
it's
easily
not a
afford
problem.
and upgrade.
And George is ready with the signs if we have a.
Okay, do you want me to just start?
Yes.
George, put on your stopwatch. Okay. 1, 2, 3, go. So, safety. Yeah, we did enact an ordinance a few years ago to try to deal with the 5G cellular rollout that really isn't rolling out all that much. We probably should take a look at the new technologies. I have looked at the applications for antennas for 5G. They're minimal. And the ones that they're putting up today are not like the ones that we had contemplated when we first wrote this legislation. These are not big antennas, but they're what they call strand antennas. You wouldn't be able to distinguish them from the stuff that's already hanging up on the wires. They're not big antennas sticking up on big towers. So we may want to revisit that. And what was the other part of the question? I can't remember the other issues.
Herbicides, banning herbicides.
Right. We really don't have a dog in that race. You're upside down, Mike. George, it's upside down. But I can read at 30. We don't really regulate that sort of thing. So no, I don't think that's something for us to consider. The 5G antennas are things that do go up around us, and we do have a responsibility for doing something about. We've done it, and probably ought to take a second look at the technology. Okay.
Thank you very much. Ben, your turn.
I must say, George, doing a great job as a timer. Should we create regulations to ban pesticides and herbicides? No. That's a very easy question for me. 5G, I would defer to the county. I would not take responsibility for it. I would see what the county does, and I would work from there. How am I doing in time, George?
You have a minute left.
Minute left.
All right, I'm good.
Timer's on. Timer's on.
Yeah, here it is.
Sorry, before we move to the next person, the timer is back on. So for the candidates, if you want to try and repin that, it should be back up and running. So you won't have to look at my.
Can we
sign.
request that George do it? Or
It disappeared again. Sorry.
No, it's,
All right, Susan, you're up next on that question.
Okay. So I also believe that that is really more, that banning herbicides, for example, is really the appropriate role for the county, and that we really shouldn't engage in that level of regulation when we don't necessarily have the expertise to justify it. I wouldn't have an objection to looking at the cell permitting to see whether that needs to be updated, but I think that we really don't want to overstep.
Jeff?
Thank you, and again, another fabulous, amazing question. So I'm going to take it from this angle. First, if we looked at the survey that the Safety Task Force provided, the responses, I think, were somewhat mixed, but though trending relatively high on concern about 5G. We did see some information on the listserv around even gas leaf blowers, and also we saw some discussion on herbicides. I agree. This is stuff technically we don't know a lot about. We don't have a lot of, well, we do have some resident experts, but on the council, this hasn't really been our job. However, I do think that it does make a case for having perhaps a forum, having another discussion about the priorities that the community has. But there are also, rather than banning and regulation, there are some very innovative programs around incentives that we have for replacement, for example, of leaf blowers that use gas, or using pesticides that are not toxic to the environment or small children. So I think this makes a case of why a task force, safety task force, could be extended for research or information gathering to better inform perhaps decisions, or even looking at how the county could help us in these areas. Thank you.
Marty, it is your turn.
And thank you. I'm an environmentalist, but I do not believe we need any more heavy-handed regulations or ordinances. There are efficient, non-coercive, down-to-earth ways to encourage movement, to kid and pet safety for lawn care, to discourage the use of the gas leaf blowers. I'd love to be on a group that helps do that. It's very doable without new regulations. On the 5G stuff, I think it really is important for us to look at that again. Our ordinance may not protect us as much as we would hope. Gaithersburg and a number of other towns have looked at it more because, in fact, the information has changed. There was a big circuit court case, U.S. Court of Appeals, that said that the FCC had not properly evaluated the scientific evidence there. And I'm not just talking health impacts. I'm talking about the effects on trees. D.C. just put in a 5G law about the way that some of the 5G antennas, even though they're smaller, as you say, Arthur, we're killing the trees. So there's a lot to look at here, and I think, again, we don't have the expertise, but a community forum to really discuss the issue, bring in some experts, inform us all, and then look at how we can have an ordinance here that reflects the current state of play. The county is not stopping this in any reasonable way, in my opinion. They've kind of given green light to the telecoms to come into our right-of-ways, and so the villages and towns around are in fact taking a step forward. We should look at what other people are doing and step up to protect our people. Thank you.
George?
So our question gets to an issue that some of the candidate responses already touched on this evening. Do you support any changes to how the council operates or develops and reviews ordinances? Specifically, changes that could reduce legal fees, improve clarity, or improve follow-up to committee recommendations? Susan, you're first.
Okay, so changes that could, would you mind repeating?
Reduce legal fees, improve clarity for residents, or improve follow-up to committee recommendations?
Okay, so I think that our ordinance process does provide for a period of time, a minimum of 30 days after introduction before an ordinance is voted on. And as a result of those ordinances that Jeff mentioned, including the ethics ordinance, the procedure was, I think, clarified and perhaps extended a bit to allow for more resident comment, and a forum or two, as well as committee meetings in which there were discussions. I don't know that those changes would necessarily reduce legal fees. I think we should be good for ordinances for the foreseeable future, so that should obviate those sorts of costs.
Thank you, Susan. Arthur, you're up next.
Yeah. Well, about a year or two ago, we actually discussed a resolution in the council to have every ordinance be preceded by somebody who is sponsoring it with a discussion and description why it was being introduced, what it was intended to do. And we seem to have kind of forgotten about doing that. But most of the ordinances we pass are very technical, in the sense of changing a comma here or there. We just passed 2 or 3 at our last meeting where we were approving the property tax for the year. There were actually 3 or 4 separate items on the agenda that had to be passed to do that. So it really, the ordinances that we deal with are fairly technical in nature. It's unusual that the biggies come up that require a lot of discussion. And I think that if we're worried about the attorney's fees, they're not coming up on the ordinance discussion so much as about resident comments, arguments, discussions, things that come up in committee meetings that have to be addressed for legal counsel. So it's not the ordinance process itself that's driving the legal fees, but all the other things that we do. In my 10 seconds left, I'll just mention that I looked at the calendars, our monthly calendars going back to last year. We have 3 to 6 events per month in Martin's Edition, meetings of various committees, the council, and other groups that require some kind of review by council. He doesn't have to be sitting there.
Arthur.
It requires review.
Thank you. Marty?
Well, I'm no fan of new ordinances. I think that what we need is community cooperation and common sense. I'm very practical. I think that there are ways to take care of issues from leaf blowers to ordinance adoption that really can be much more community-based. One of the issues that came up about the yard sign ordinance, which nobody had asked for, came out of the blue, and then the bias ordinance, which also surprised people asked for, is that those are just problems in the community. So I'm really anxious to see our village really respect the residents and have, if we have to look at some kind of ordinance on anything, it should be community-based upward, not council downward, top-down. I also think that the ordinance process in terms of open discussions and information, Arthur, I much appreciate that change that you helped make. I was one of the people who advocated for it, to have an explanation of why do you think this is necessary in the first place before any ordinance goes forward at any level. I also think that at some point, if you have a contentious ordinance like the bias one was, that you have a referendum on it. Again, community-based involvement, community government, self-government, practical. I think the biggest cost about ordinances isn't the legal fees, it's the time. The hundreds of hours that the council and the committee and the villagers, right, spent on those ordinances. I mean, what a drain. We should have been doing the street signs and the crosswalks and the speed monitors. We lost basically a whole year dealing with an ordinance that I personally think was not necessary instead of taking care of business. I'm very practical. Let's get down to work.
Ben?
I am very thankful for whoever sent in that question. I promise you it wasn't me. We've spent 6 times the amount of legal fees for our village than Section 3 and Section 5 did. I do not believe that we are such a group of rogue misfits and ne'er-do-wells that we need to be like monitored. And I disagree with Arthur. I don't think a council needs to read every committee meeting or review everything that happened at a committee. How do we reduce the legal fees? We ensure that we only make ordinances definitely necessary. And I will point to something that happened on Taylor Street. On Taylor and Delafield, there was a garage that was being built, and the width of the garage was like 14 feet or 15 feet. And the code, even before it was amended, would have made this to be an improper garage. If you read it in totality, it specifically says corner lots have 2 front yards. The change between an end and an or was completely not necessary and a waste of dollars. I think we just need to be smart. We need to realize that when we make new ordinances, we're spending the village's money. And so I would limit the amount of new ordinance unless it's something that's truly an emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Jeff?
Great. Well, to go after everyone else is it feels a little bit easier. This might be the first time, but I'll just start off with our old friend Harry Truman. He said that the only thing new in the world is the history you don't know. And I think that what we did learn through the process the other year with signs and ethics ordinance are things will be addressed going forward, right? And those had to do with whether or not you state the problem up front. You have forums, the timing of publishing of meeting minutes, a lot of minutia, quite frankly. If I keep going on, folks will probably drone off and go to sleep knowing the hour. But they're important, and they will avoid perhaps some tensions that we had. I do want to bring up another area, though, which, again, we just had a meeting yesterday on a variance for a resident. And Arthur had a fabulous suggestion. We had all this time and energy spent having a resident come in and present their variance, and essentially, it was reviewing a lot of information that had already been presented in a prior variance hearing. And so I think there are certainly ways for us to streamline, because using that as an example, really what it comes down to, are we being efficient with our time, and are we being kind, and are we addressing the needs of the community in ways that are respecting their time? Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, we have 1 minute candidate statements, and I guess Eric is going to handle that.
Yes, sir. We'll give Niles a moment to change the clock, and then I'll call on Ben, Marty, Jeff, Susan, and Arthur in that order to do 1 minute candidate statements. Good to go?
Yep.
Ben, would you like to start? Why not? It's been a long night. You're throwing out a lot of different questions. Thank you for that. I hope you got to get a better understanding of what I stand for. If you agree with me, please vote for me. If not, please vote. Have a great night. I yield my time to Marty.
Thank you.
Marty, you're up.
That was a joke.
Okay. I value efficiency like Ben does. I'm a very practical person. I've run a successful business for 20 years here. I served on our election committee. We had very efficient, voter-friendly elections. I'll bring the same kind of friendly, efficient management skills to the council. I think we can do things just to be more practical, more positive, more focused, and get things done. Again, my main issue is the public safety. It takes 2 hours to put in a speed hump. Why have we not done it for 6 years? I can help with that. I think that a lot of the issues that we're talking about here, like 2 long meetings and all, are because we don't have the sort of standard practices that we should have, the structure. It's just a framework. It's not anything mysterious of how people can feel heard and share communication, and not just load the council meetings with all of that repressed commentary. And I think that the issue of efficient meetings, the issue of efficient community connections, like, for example, a safety alert, is really important. There are some basic structural pieces here that are not hard to do, and that I would be very happy to help do. And I'm also really grateful that we have the first speed hump on Thorn Apple. May it be the first of many. Thank you for getting started. I would be really happy to work with the entire community to get those traffic measures in.
Thank you very much, Marty.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Yep, 1 second.
Mute, Jeff.
Great, thank you. Well, I'll just start off, and again, I want to thank everyone on the election committee, all residents who are here, who have stayed tuned, knowing it's during the week and there's a lot of competing responsibilities. This has been such a privilege for me, and serving on the council has been really an honor. And I know, having sat on this side of the coin, it's not easy. Right, and it is a volunteer position, and I really respect everyone who's been a council member. I respect everyone who's running, and you know, where I see, and as I mentioned, after a couple years of very high tension, and then just under a year ago, an election that had some sea change and a refocus of how we treat one another, and humility and respect and more voices. I look forward and having an opportunity to serve longer if I have that honor. And the most important thing, no matter what, get out and vote. That's the most important. So please, get out there, and when you get your ballot, please vote.
Thank you. Susan?
Okay, so the common thread among all the candidates seems to be that we all appreciate our village. What sets us apart is how we would be our approach to local government. I think we have an obligation to provide the best services possible, but we need to be mindful that VMA is a municipal government, not an HOA and not a social club. I bring to the role of council member many years of legal and council experience now, a historical perspective of the challenges the village has faced so that we don't revisit them, and an in-depth institutional knowledge of village operations. I, too, would encourage everyone to get out and vote, and especially vote for me. Thank you.
Finally, Arthur?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, as I look around here, I see that we've had a lot of agreement, a lot of disagreement, and nobody's gotten angry. I also see we have a number of former council members sitting here, Mike Solinsky, there's Gene Sperling, Josh Bowers, Larry Watson, people who've all volunteered for the community over the years. And I want to thank them all. And what I would like to bring to the council for another 2 years, we can talk about term limits later, is consideration, an analysis, experience, and the willingness to change in the future. The ability to look at new ventures and new ways of looking at things. So again, I look forward to the election. I look forward to your vote. And as I said, next year we'll talk about term limits. So thank you, everybody.
Mr. Chairman, we have some time remaining, and I would like to propose another question that was submitted by Jean Sperling. I see she's on here and watching very carefully, typing, but a very pertinent question with your permission. May I have that?
I think so. I think we'll keep I know which question you're talking about. I think it's the 1 minute timer now should be fine for doing this as long as the candidates are fine. I think we can move through this pretty well because I think it's a good wrap up to the evening.
Okay, Gene Sperling's question. What would you like to see different in Martin's additions? How would you accomplish this? Thank you, Gene. What would you like different?
So I think we can start with Susan.
I think, well, besides walkability implementation, which obviously is my key concern, I would like to have more in-person events. We need to get back to that. We need to have more social interchange so that people do feel like it's a small town again. And I'll cede my time to Arthur.
That actually works. On our list, Arthur, you are up next.
Okay. Yeah, I think the walkability is critical. It's not just speed bumps. It's possible sidewalks. It's abutments that where we could do plantings and make the community better looking. And if we could cut out the through traffic, let them go through some other village. That would be a major improvement to the life of the village. And you know, the cars that are cutting through on their way to somewhere else is one of the major problems here. And I think if we make driving onerous enough, they'll just go elsewhere. That would cut down much of the traffic, much of the problem, and really improve the safety and walkability for the entire village.
Thank you, Arthur. Ben?
I would say a better sense of community. We've all seen the listserv devolve into, at times, the CNN comment section of Facebook. We're a small community, we're neighbors, should act with that. I yield my time to somebody else.
Thank you, Ben. Marty?
Thanks, and I appreciate you yielding your time. I think communication, again, listserv, message board, public forums, alert systems, emergency alert systems, that's part of basic safety. I mean, my goodness, we don't even have a community alert system. We really need to get there. I would get Niles better office equipment because, the glitches are not his fault. And I appreciate very much, Niles, you keeping this whole thing rolling. And I really think that the safety stuff, the issue here is not that we don't know what to do about the streets. It's that we haven't done it. And so I think what I would change about the village is just efficient, focused performance. Get things done. And I think that all of the structural stuff I've talked to in terms of communication structures and frameworks, and really it's about focusing and getting it done. And I'm efficient. I would love to have your vote, and I thank you for voting for me. And let's make a better village together. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. So last we come to conclude with Jeff. I think you're still, there we go.
Great. Gene, I love the question. Thank you. I think a couple things, and, recognizing safety and the things that mentioned are certainly dear to my heart and also many residents. I think two new things I would love to see. First, I'd like to see more recognition of our volunteers. We have a lot of amazing people who do amazing things to help the community, and I would like to see some sort of, even if it's informal recognition award, so that we can elevate and showcase all those great things that happen, build that community. I think the other piece, which I would really like to see, is how we can improve how we talk to one another on the council. I think a real key issue that we've seen is interpretation of the Open Meetings Act in ways that we can't even walk around when there's a technical consultant together because we're afraid of violating it. I would like to see when I went out to Santa Cruz in California, where the council members were jumping off the pier together and talking. Now, I'm not saying that Arthur, Susan, and everyone should jump off the pier with me, but I would like to see something where we could at least walk together, talk, and not have to feel being policed that we're in violation of something. I think that we are able to police ourselves. So thank you. More communication, more kindness. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, for the record, I'll jump off the pier from left or not.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes the 2022 VMA Elections Forum. As the chair of the committee, I would like to say thank you once again to all of the residents who've sent in comments. They were fantastic. They were a huge help for us in putting this together. Thank you to the candidates for making time tonight. Thank you to the rest of the committee members and to Niles for everything that you've done to help get this together. And especially thank you to all of the residents who have dialed in. This shows a wonderful level of engagement with the election here in the community. As a reminder, I mentioned this at the top, ballots will be going out fairly soon. You'll get notification from the village when they are in the mail, so you know to start looking for them. All of the details related to the election plan, what the ballots look like, and some initial ballot instructions can all be found on the webpage through the village committee and the committee website, and they are also available at the village office for opportunity for you to review. Again, if you have any questions throughout the election process, please email the committee. We are happy to help either answer the question, address a concern, or help connect to make sure that we make this as smooth and easy as possible. And again, I will conclude and say thank you once again to everyone, and I hope you have a very good night.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Niles. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. You don't have to do anything. I will end the meeting for all, so don't worry about it.
Perfect. Thank you, Niles.
Take care, folks. Thank you so much.